Hey, good morning. It is Wednesday, December, what is this? I've lost track. It's what?
19th.
The 19th, December 19th? Oh my God, we're almost there. I've lost track just because I've been running across the street to get here just in time to come on the air, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Welcome to Java with Jerry. We're glad you come and join us every Wednesday at 10 o'clock, and maybe we can get through an entire show without a fire drill. Those of you that watched last week know in the middle of the last story, which is really the key story for today, ba-boom, we get a fire drill, voices start coming from on high, lights are flashing, and we all abandon you. So if you were watching that episode, you'll understand why we left in a truncated form, and we'll pick up what I was going to talk about later in today's show. But we're delighted you're here as always. Those of you who are getting it later on Orange Slice, we're glad that you go there, and you can see all the past episodes there, of course. And those of you listening on Podbean or however you're getting the podcast, we appreciate you joining us as well. Whatever you're doing today, we're glad you're listening. So we will do, as always, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and we will have an important story for you at the end, which is going to consume most of the episode because it was one that we had to defer from last week, but it was one that was where I was this morning and why I'm late. All right, let's start with the news, and I'm going to do a couple of state stories. We'll skip the national story. There's lots of stuff happening nationally, as you know. The biggest of which is we're arm wrestling over whether or not we're going to shut down the government. We don't really shut it down, so to speak. They just furlough some federal employees and then give them back pay later, but it makes life uncomfortable for them. And it does change some of the services and some of the departments, but not the critical ones. But anyway, that debate is going on. Looks like they're trying to solve a problem. They'll figure out what they're going to do. Let's talk about some California stories. In the California Political Views and News, which I read, there was the article written by Dan Walters, who, as you know, is one of the brilliant thinkers in California about issues that are a struggle for us. And he wrote about a particular northern county to us, northern here, southern to those of you up north, Ventura County. And he talks about the housing shortage will be California's economy's biggest bite. And so you can find it in the December 16th edition of California Political News and Views, and probably in some other places that carry Dan Walter's columns. And he said the most obvious and most important victim of California's chronic and still growing housing shortage are the countless of thousands of families that struggle to find roofs over their heads. There's truth in that. And I have argued for a long time also are millennials who would like to be able to start careers and families here, but can't find affordable housing. The shortage has driven prices skyward. In the classic example of supply and demand, he says, and housing costs are obviously the single biggest factor in California's shameful status of having the nation's highest level of poverty. And you got to think about that for a minute. You're the fifth largest economy in the world as a standalone state. If California were a nation, not part of the United States, it would be the fifth largest economy, and yet it has the nation's highest level of poverty. And shame on you, Sacramento, for that, because it's all your responsibility. This economic dimension to housing crisis, he says, is getting worse as the economy overall is struggling to find housing for employees, and they're having serious shortages of skilled workers because they're all fleeing. Why? Because they don't have any opportunities here. Why would you stay here if you're a skilled worker if you can find housing and better schools in another place? Come on, Sacramento, wake up. This month, economists at California's Lutheran University delivered some very sobering and negative news about Ventura County's economy. That's the county north of us I was referring to, south of many of you who listen. The dominant economic story in Ventura County is one of a continued total economic activity stagnation. And what's happening there is told by local businesses as they hesitate to expand their workforce because they can't find housing for people and they find other places to go. We hesitate to use the word recession, they say, because we don't know what else to call consecutive years of economic contraction, which is what Ventura has seen, largely because of Ventura's NIMBYs. Ventura people who live on the coast in a very bucolic and beautiful place really don't want a lot of other people there. So they say, no, you can't build it in my place. And the net result is they lose people who would be part of their economic life, and they reach stagnation, which is fine as long as all you can do is sit home and, water your tulips. But if you're doing anything at all where you require some kind of commerce, you're not going to get it. He says that the average economic growth over 4 years in Ventura was 0.0. The worst 4-year period for which they have data. 0.0 for Ventura County. Feinup, who's the guy that did the study, attributed this malaise to the growing housing affordability crisis and the inability of business to attract and retain talent. You think? Ventura County's chronic lack of new construction is driven by a set of urban growth policies which rank as the most stringent growth restrictions in the United States, and they've got them written into ordinances. Ventura is one of several California counties and cities that have adopted the Save Open Space and Agricultural Resources, or SOAR restrictions that make it virtually impossible to build housing on agricultural land. SOAR is the most virulent form of not in my backyard policies that are major impediments to the expanding housing market that we need in order to keep up with population growth, replace housing that's lost to fires, and begin closing a shortage in the several millions. State officials in California say they need to build, catch this, 180,000 new units a year. 180,000 housing units a year is the need. During the Great Recession, it was driven down to construction of as low as 30,000 a year, which shows you how that gap built over those years, and those were many years of contraction where that gap was 150,000 units a year. So that's been built up, right? We're hundreds of thousands of units behind and dropping every year. A new report on Ventura's stagnant economy indicates California will pay a steep price if it fails to meet its housing crisis. Job-creating investment will decline in California as it has in Ventura, and we become even more economically polarized as we have a vanishing middle class for a whole lot of reasons that we've talked about in other episodes I won't replow. Incoming Governor Gavin Newsom talks about ramping up housing construction, but talk is cheap, says the article. The real question is whether he and the legislature will confront the NIMBYism by intervening in local land use policy and compelling Ventura and other localities that resist new construction to meet the state's housing requirements. How they do that would really be heavy-handed, but maybe that's what it requires. It would require courage because NIMBYism is most evident in the coastal communities that strongly support who? Newsom and his Democratic majority. That's part of their base. So they'd have to turn to their base and say, you got to do your fair share to do housing. And I raise housing as an issue that we're going to come back to because it dovetails with what I want to talk about this morning that got truncated at our last show and has really been completed as of this morning, and that's what we've done in Anaheim to address some issues of housing. All right, let me switch gears for a minute, go to a completely different story, one that is sort of on a completely different wavelength, also a state story, but one that also shows you a failure in leadership in Sacramento, which is thematic. And as you know, over this last year, we've been talking about that a lot. Drug use in our prisons are now killing more prisoners, as is old age, than the death penalty that they were given. Drug use is killing murderers on San Quentin's death row. Drug use. That's what's killing them. Not the gas chamber, not the execution of their sentence. Drug use in our prisons. Not that that's a failure, right, Sacramento? An overdose of drugs is killing death row inmates at San Quentin. While over 700 are on death row awaiting execution, it won't be in the electric chair or the gas chamber. They will die of either old age or disease. And now drugs are beginning to take them because they're voluntarily killing themselves with overdoses, not purposely, but in many cases, but they are. There is clearly a spike in overdose events on top of a baseline of month-to-month they're finding. Dr. Matt Willis, who's Marin County's public health officer where San Quentin is located, says in the past 6 months, the county's emergency services have responded 155 times by ambulance to San Quentin because of drug overdoses, largely opioids. Last Monday, Herminio Serna, a 53-year-old gang member sentenced to death for multiple murders in San Jose, was found unresponsive in his cell. The day after, guards found Joseph Perez, a 47-year-old inmate, sentenced to death for killing a woman who was stabbed and strangled during a robbery in her Lafayette home in 1998, also unresponsive. Both of these murderers gone by use of drugs. State prison officials have now linked the two deaths with illegal drug use. In a statement from the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, which I have to laugh at, corrections and rehabilitation, The healthcare staff at San Quentin are conducting outreach and education for inmates to teach them the dangers of drug abuse. It's good that we're closing that barn door once the horse is sort of gone. Willis said recent cases in San Quentin are part of a cyclical trend. It seems that this is a typical pattern. We see a batch of deaths from very high-potency drugs like fentanyl and heroin come into the community, and we see these spikes. Then the cases are given attention by the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, and illegal drug use in the prisons abates for a while, and then we see the cycle come back again. Well, there's success. At least we get abatement for a while. It's absolutely unacceptable to be holding people who are in effect wards of the state and to have them dying on our watch from illegal substances, says Nancy Skinner, a Democrat of Berkeley, who chairs the, what did you chair, Nancy? The Senate's Public Safety Committee, which called on corrections to do a better job of preventing liberal opioid use in our prisons. I mean, come on, folks. You've got these people incarcerated. You're the ones who are in charge of the facilities. Give me a break. Last April, a series of suspected overdoses at Mule Creek State Prison in Amador County killed one mate and sickened 12 others. State tests determined that fentanyl was the prime suspect in those cases. There's a lot of drugs coming in from China. How they get here, through what border, doesn't really matter. Some is flown in, some come in through our southern border, some are actually coming in through Canada, but a lot of Chinese fake drugs that are laced with fentanyl, which just a grain the size of a salt granule is potent enough in some cases to kill you. The following month, after the Amador County opioid issue, Governor Brown's administration unveiled a new strategy to reduce the amount of illegal drugs in state prisons. Okay, well, I'm all ears. What's the new strategy, you say? Well, Governor Brown's new strategy was that his budget included $13.8 million for a proposal to search everyone who enters and exits California's substance abuse treatment facility or state prisons in Cochran in Kings County. That's a good idea. Let's search people. Drugs do find their way into the state's 35 institutions, said a spokesperson, Terry Thornton, for the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. There's no tolerance for this. It undermines safety. You think? So we're driving people away who are productive, and we're letting people who aren't but are incarcerated just die from drug overdoses rather than executing their sentence. Why worry about the death penalty when we've got drugs running rampant in our prisons? Unbelievable. All right, that's the failure at the state level. We've talked a lot about the failures of government there, and we've talked a lot about the failures of government in the national level, to be sure. But let's talk about success for a change. Let's end on a happy note. After all, we're hurling toward Christmas. So I've got a great story to tell you, and it's one that I started to tell last week, and man, I was just getting into it, and voila, fire drill. Hopefully no fire drill today. All right, let me tell you about this story. Many of you know that for many years, the former administration in Anaheim called Anaheim the city of kindness, but Anaheim was also a hotbed of homelessness. We had them all over the riverbed, along the area, the Santa Ana River that sits at the very eastern edge of the city, near Anaheim Stadium and Honda Center. We had them throughout our parks in Anaheim, and we had the similar problem in other cities as well. Santa Ana was plagued with them in the Civic Center, where county and federal and state buildings all reside along with Santa Ana City Hall. They've been in the parks in Tustin, they've been in the public squares in City Hall in Tustin, they've been in Orange, they've been everywhere. And it's been a plague. And so a new administration comes in. Mayor Sadu is elected in November, and he takes office on the 4th of December and announces from the dais that he wants an emergency shelter. He's got 2 temporary shelters being constructed that'll be ready in February that will have hundreds of beds that are being put together by the Salvation Army, and they're working on what something is now styled by the Salvation Army, I think, called the Center of Hope. I hope I'm not misspeaking that. The Center of Hope will have 600 permanent supportive housing beds for the homeless. But while all that is coming online, says the mayor, it's not good enough for me. It's December, it's cold, it's going to get rainy. We've got homeless in our parks. They're taking away the use of our parks from our citizens and our neighborhoods. Our kids can't play in them because the homeless are camped in them. They're leaving needles behind because they're drug addicted and not getting services. It's getting cold, it's going to get rainy, and I want them out of the parks. So, says the mayor from the dais, I want a temporary emergency shelter opened in 2 weeks. I want it open by the 20th of December. Everybody looks up, rolls their eyes and says, what? But the mayor is serious about it, and he reaches out to the business community and says, I want you to roll up your sleeves and work with me, and he tells city staff, you're going to get this done. And almost as if you were watching a episode of the Ten Commandments with Yul Brynner as Pharaoh saying, so let it be written, so let it be done. Everybody rolls up their sleeves. Lawyers get in conference rooms, they start drafting agreements. People are reaching out to people who have warehouse buildings across the street from this very building where we broadcast, owned by LT Investments, who says, what do you want from us? And the mayor and others say, we want you to give us your building for free for 90 days so we can get people off the streets. Next thing you know, Castillo Builders has got a contract. Visit Anaheim's 501c3 charity, Visit Anaheim Cares, which is a philanthropic arm of the hospitality industry, rolls up its sleeves and says, yeah, we'll be the vehicle for putting this all together. The city puts up an agreement with the Illumination Foundation, who comes in and says, we'll operate it if you can build it. And a team of people go to work almost 24/7 for the last 14 days. And here we are on the 19th, some 15 days after that happened, and I ran across the street this morning from that warehouse, which is right out that window, where the mayor and the city council met with all the partners that put up money, and there were a ton of them that put up money from the private sector as well. The Samuelis and the Ducks put up $50,000. Disney put up $50,000. The Angel said, yeah, in my backyard, you can put it right in my backyard, and I'll write you a check for $50,000 on top of it. And lots of people, Rainbow Disposal and all kinds of contractors and West Coast arborists who have plants throughout this entire place. There's art on the wall. There are graphics that were done by painters. There are beds and linens and pillows, and there are showers indoors. You cannot believe the transformation of a shell warehouse building that 2 weeks ago had no power, no water, no ability to provide heat, no lighting, nothing. An empty, abandoned warehouse is now going to be home to 200, count them, 200 homeless people. How will they get that many in there? You say, well, Paul Leone from Illumination Foundation announced this morning 155 people are signed up to come in. And starting at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, they'll start doing intake just outside this window, and they will get people out of the weather. The neighbors will get their parks back. The kids will get to play. People will get services they've never had before. Children will have a safe place to be at night when they're homeless, and they won't be in the parks. They'll be out of the weather, and notwithstanding what we always say about California, we do get cold nights and we do get rain, and it gets chilly some nights down to almost freezing cold. And if you're out in the weather with nothing but a blanket and a tent, that's not really a comfortable place for you to be, and doesn't really provide for your good health. And all of that will change because Mayor Sadu told all of his friends in Anaheim, I want something done in 2 weeks. And we got it done. And it's an amazing thing to see. I was there, and you'll probably see B-roll in news stories, and you'll be able to see some of it in the taped editing version of this story, because my friend and colleague Carlos Majulas has been shooting some film for me, and he's going to embed it in here in the way he edits the show, so you'll be able to come back and watch the episode on Orange Slice anew, those of you that are watching live, and you'll be able to see what can happen when all of the city leaders roll up their sleeves, put their mind to it. And let me tell you, it took everybody. It took lawyers drafting and accountants doing spreadsheets, and private sector people putting up money, obviously, to have it happen, and the amazing people at Castillo Builders who went in and took this shell and transformed it. And they have a little video that I hope someday you'll be able to see that's time elapsed, so you can see how they took it from nothing to what it is. And it's nothing short of a miracle. In fact, the mayor and Jay Barres from Visit Anaheim, who were the major partners on this, the city and Visit Anaheim Cares, both today called it the miracle on State College. So you got a new Christmas movie story that you can tell, the miracle on State College. It took a shell warehouse building with no funding, and in the course of 14 days transformed it into a place that can accommodate up to 200 people, can provide them meals, can give them services. And I don't mean just a place to squat and live. They are bringing in people that will have book clubs for them. They're going to help kids with homework. I mean, it's amazing the services Illumination will bring to bear for this 90-day short window, while the temporary facility that's due in February and ultimately the Center of Hope is built out. And that was all because of the will of a mayor who said, make it happen. And let me tell you, he drove that train, Harry Sidhu. He was calling from a vacation in India where he and his wife went to go spread his mother-in-law's ashes who had just passed, asking what the progress was, calling at 1:05 in the morning, our time, to know what people were doing in the building. He hit the tarmac and immediately dials up Todd Amante, who's the CEO of the Anaheim Chamber, and says, meet me over the building on Sunday. I want to see what's going on. And as soon as he had landed, he was in the building to see what was happening. He pushed hard to get it done. Virtually the entire council was there this morning. All of the community partners were there. We all got a tour of what it looks like. It's absolutely amazing. And it shows you what can happen when you really want to make something happen. So congratulations to Mayor Sidhu and the City of Anaheim and all their amazing staff. To visit Anaheim Cares and their leadership, Jay Barres and all the people there that make charitable works happen in Anaheim, and to all the people at Castillo Builders and all the partners that worked with them and all the providers that gave things to have this happen, down to the artist, I don't know who he is, that painted all these inspirational sayings that are all over these temporary walls that are in the space in which people will now be residing as of 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. And so now the City of Anaheim can go get them out of the park and get them into a safe place to be. So congratulations to all of you for the miracle on State College. And that's a good news story about how government can work. And I put it in sort of contrast to those other stories to show you there are stories where we fail miserably. And we fail miserably because we don't think about what the root of the problem is. Right? We miss the root because we're treating the symptom. We worry about whether or not cyclically we can, get rid of opioid addiction, rather than worried about why prisoners are getting drugs in the first place in what's supposed to be a secure facility, and why they're not getting treatment so that you don't have to have cyclical events like this. And why are people who are in our care dying? In Anaheim's case, people who might otherwise be dying in the public parks using drugs are being interdicted because the mayor and the city council and the business community rolled up their sleeves and said, yeah, we're going to work together and we're going to make this happen in 14 days. Listen, I've been around government for decades. I was in government for 10 years. Nothing happens in 14 days unless it's a tragedy. Nothing. But Anaheim got it done in 14 days. So all of you that say you can't do it, shame on you. Of course you can. You just got to roll up your sleeves and want to do it. We have a housing crisis. We're losing all the young people. We can't figure out how to make it affordable. I can tell you how you can make it affordable. Why don't you take are you ready for this figure? Listen to this. $100,000 worth of regulations per door off the back of the building industry. It costs us $100,000 a living unit to comply with all the crap that government puts on us in terms of regulation, none of which really makes the housing any better, right? Why don't we do that? Because if you roll up your sleeves and you want to solve a problem, you can do it. So there's your good news story, the miracle on State College. If you got a moment, send a note to Harry Sidhu and tell him thanks, because for 10 years we've been babbling in Anaheim about being a city of kindness, and in 14 days from the moment he was sworn, he actually turned it into a city of kindness. One more big thank you. And he probably won't like it that I do this, but probably doesn't watch the show anyway. And if someone outs me, shame on you for outing me. But there was one fellow in all of this that wanted to make it happen for the city. He wanted to help people who otherwise couldn't help themselves. He wanted to help the mayor make his vision a reality. He helped move obstacles out of the way. He helped bring people to bear that otherwise would not have come to play in this arena, and his name is Bill Taormina. I know some of you know him who are in and around Anaheim. He is a philanthropist, businessman, and someone who really cares, has a heart for those who are less fortunate. And Bill Taormina rolled up his sleeves and really made stuff happen. And he's very close to Judge Carter, who he's been working with on this homelessness issue for a couple of years, to the point where when it was coming before the council to approve doing this in 14 days, the once Mayor Pro Tem, no longer, now Council Member Jose Moreno, questioned whether or not you could pull it off. There were neighbors in the area that might sue. You might get a temporary restraining order, and if they do that and they delay it a little bit, you won't be able to pull this off. And how are you going to know that there won't be, a problem, that we'll be having enough funds, and that there won't be an issue where the city could get sued? And, Mr. Moreno had a million things that could go wrong. And Bill Taormina walked up into the podium at City Hall and looked him straight in the face and said, I'll put my personal fortune up and I'll guarantee any losses the city has, any of it, I'll pick up the tab for all of it. This is a $1 million project, $1.4 million when you count the operating expense and what it took to put it together so that we could get people off the street. And Bill Taormina says, I'll cover any downside any of you have. That is a mensch. That's a guy who has a heart for charity. Bill Taormina is a hero. So, good on you, Bill. God's smiling in Anaheim because of people like Harry Sadu and Bill Taormina. All right, enough of that. I hope in a few days you have a fabulous Christmas with your family. I know you won't be on the street. You'll be having a good time because I'm sure of it. And I'm delighted that that's the case. I hope you'll come back and join us next year. We're going to have a very brief little Christmas, New Year's message for you that'll play next week, the day after Christmas. And then we will see you in January. We got some big stuff planned for you. Starting January 10th will be our first show. We're going to go dark for the holidays after the 26th. We'll do our little message to you on the 26th. And then we will see you again on the 10th when we kick this back off again. I hope you have a fabulous Christmas, wonderful holidays with your family, that you get to enjoy them. Give them a big hug, and we'll see you January 10th for, well, we'll see you on the 26th for a brief message, and then again January 10th for more Java with Jerry. Merry Christmas.